Linton family is a household name in the nation's religious, educational and medical circles, as it has over a century-old history of contributions to Korean society. It all started with Eugene Bell, a Southern Presbyterian missionary who was dispatched to Korea in 1895. His son-in-law, William Linton, carried on Bell's missionary work in Korea, and their descendants have also continued to build on their legacy of humanitarian and philanthropic work. Today, we have with us the great-grandson of Eugene Bell, Stephen Linton, who established the Eugene Bell Foundation in 1995, coinciding with the 100th anniversary of Bell's arrival in Korea. The foundation has been providing humanitarian and medical assistance to North Korea, particularly when it comes to tackling tuberculosis. But that has been disrupted in recent years due to the pandemic and the regime's restrictions. Dr. Linton has joined us today for Touch Base in Seoul to tell us about his family's work and the foundation. Dr. Linton, hello and welcome to the show.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
My pleasure to be here.
Can you first tell us about your family's story, starting with yourself? I understand you were born in the US, but
Yes.
grew up in Korea and have now lived here for several decades.
Yes, I was born in Philadelphia and first arrived here when I was 3 years old, and with my missionary parents, and we grew up in Suncheon. Went to boarding school for middle and high school in Daejeon, and have been rotating between the U.S. and Korea ever since.
Your family has a deep connection to Korea, going back 4 generations, right?
Yes.
Starting with Eugene Bell. Can you tell us about your family's work and how Eugene Bell came to Korea all those years ago?
Well, Eugene Bell and his wife, Lottie Witherspoon Bell, arrived here, as you said, in 1895. They were Southern Presbyterian missionaries who felt called to Korea. Lottie only lived a few years. She was the first Southern Presbyterian to die in Korea. And Eugene Bell continued until his death in 1925. They opened the mission station in Mokpo after several years of language study in Seoul, and then after her death, he returned to Korea and opened the mission station in Gwangju and worked primarily with church work and other mission activities until his death. And then my grandfather came out as a single missionary and met my grandmother when she was visiting her father after finishing college. And they got married and raised 4 boys in Gunsan and Cheonju. And then he finished his missionary life helping to start the college in Daejeon. And and then my father came back and went to Suncheon and raised 6 children with my mother, and I was one of them.
Well, your grandfather and great-grandfather, they contributed a lot to Korean society at a very troubled time in Korean history. What did you know of your family's history as you were growing up?
Not that much. Missionaries didn't, at least Southern Presbyterian missionaries were not interested in national projects of any kind. They were here primarily to start the church. And they believed that if Koreans had an opportunity to hear the gospel and became Christian, that whatever changes they would want to make in their society, they could make for themselves. So they were not at all political and focused primarily on church work.
But they helped bring education, Western education, and Western medicine to Korea. They contributed in that way quite a lot as well, didn't they?
Well, yeah, missionaries did that. They pushed education because they believed that everyone should read the Bible. And in order to do that, you needed to at least understand Hangul. And so the Protestant missionaries were very diligent in translating the Bible into vernacular Korean. And then, of course, part of mission work has always been taking care of sick people. And so It began as very simple clinics, and in certain areas, those clinics developed into hospitals, yes.
So then moving forward, how did you start the foundation, the Eugene Bell Foundation? Was it natural for you to start the foundation in his name?
I was a associate professor at Columbia University, and working in the Center for Korean Research at the time that North Korea made an official announcement that it needed food assistance. I had been to North Korea several times previous to that, and had kept contact with the North Korean mission in New York, and received a formal request to provide food assistance. And I realized that obviously I didn't have any money. And at that time, there were very few people in the U.S. who specialized in North Korea.
How did you go to North Korea before?
I had a chance to go there as an observer to the Table Tennis Federation meet in 1979, and it fascinated me. I wasn't interested in ping pong, but the opportunity to travel to North Korea was a real unusual experience, and I incorporated a study of North Korea in my doctoral dissertation. So I maintained those contacts from that time on, and so they contacted me, among everyone else, I'm sure, who was in their Rolodex at the time, for food assistance. And at that time, I was doing consulting on the food situation for the UN, some UN agencies and larger NGOs, and it was very obvious that the people who were really interested in assisting North Koreans were Korean Americans, not non-Korean Americans. This was after the 1988 Olympics, and most of the American public has never been really that clear on the difference between North and South Korea, and could not understand why a nation that had hosted the Olympics would need food assistance, and it was difficult to explain. And so I decided that it might be good to work out a conduit for Korean Americans to donate food assistance to North Korea in a way that didn't break American law and was efficient and transparent. And so with some assistance from people that I knew, including family members, I organized the Eugene Bell Foundation, and didn't really expect it to be needed for more than a year or two, and because we were constantly publishing the guidelines on how to send food. But instead of sending it themselves, Korean Americans began to cut checks to the Eugene Bell Foundation.
Interesting. So you initially, as you said, it was about food aid to North Korea, but then that shifted to tuberculosis.
The first year we sent 60 containers of grain from the U.S. That was the permit that you could work under with the U.S. government at that time. And then the second year, it became possible to purchase food in China and ship it. So we ended up sending 100 boxcars. And by that time, we were getting lots of money wired in to our account from Korea. And after, in late 1997, the North Koreans came to me and said, well, we appreciate the food assistance, but actually we would like you to continue assisting us, but to shift assistance to tuberculosis.
Oh, so it was North Korea who suggested it. Interesting.
I had already had TB twice, and they were aware of that. They also were aware that Southern Presbyterian missions, my parents had been involved in TB work in the South. And so I guess they thought it was a natural fit.
How serious is the tuberculosis issue in North Korea? How serious was it, and how serious did it remain over the years? That's
a difficult question. The WHO publishes statistics, but we haven't necessarily gone by them. The North Koreans say that it is their most, at least at the time, told me it was their most serious health concern. And if you look at TB worldwide, tuberculosis has killed, they say, as more people, the infectious disease that has killed more people in history than any other disease. There's nothing that comes close. And it will probably be around long after COVID and whatnot our history. So it is a disease that has impacted human society from the very beginning. You can find evidence of it in the pyramids, in the mummies in the pyramids. So it was a natural. And I think that it was a very serious problem in South Korea after the Korean War. It remains a problem here. South Korea has the highest TB rate of any OECD nation. And I think for a number of reasons it will probably remain a problem in North Korea for the foreseeable future.
We say that, but I understand that currently it's very hard to get a picture of the situation in North Korea. I understand you've not been able to go in several years.
We worked in TB from 1997 till the spring of 2020, which is a long time. But the border was closed as a measure to contain COVID, and for a number of reasons, probably, more than just COVID, the border hasn't yet opened again. And so we've been more or less on standby for the last 3 years, and anxious to get back if that opportunity is available again.
It must be very frustrating and concerning for you. As we said, you've been to Korea many times, countless times over the years, but then to not be able to go for several years like this, I'm sure it's the first time you've not been able to go for an extended period like this. So it must be very concerning. Well,
yeah, it is. But this work began as from an invitation, and our belief is that we are invited guests, and hosts obviously have the right to invite guests and also to disinvite guests, and so it's frustrating in a sense, but obviously that's the call that the North Korean government will have to make, and will whatever the decision, will abide by it.
Do you think the situation will change? The political situation has become very complicated. It's become a lot more tense than the previous administration, of course. There were hopes during the previous administration that there would be breakthroughs in relations that would perhaps help the North Korean people more as well. But now it's gone perhaps the opposite way, where restrictions have increased. Humanitarian aid has stopped to North Korea. Do you think it will turn back?
Well, I've been traveling to North Korea since '79, and more frequently since the 1990s. And there were times when the situation was very tense, and even still, travel was possible. There were times when a lot of Koreans thought reunification was right around the corner, and travel was still possible. So I've seen the situation become very relaxed and very tense a number of times. And up until COVID, for whatever their reasons, travel was always possible. So I'm not sure that the future of our program depends on whether the situation is more relaxed or not. It really depends on whether the North Koreans make a decision as to whether they want our services. And if they do, we would go whatever the situation, the political, military situation was. We've done it in the past, and we'll do it again.
And in the meantime, how does the foundation deal with this hiatus?
Well, we have continued fundraising because it's our belief that fundamentally the tuberculosis situation on the Korean Peninsula needs to be resolved. And the best way to resolve it is with support from the private sector rather than government sector, because government aid is invariably political, and tuberculosis is a long-term project. And when you have an aid project, unlike, say, emergency food aid or something like that, when you have aid project linked to politics, it's invariably off and again, on again. You need something stable and consistent and dependable. So we've taken all the funding that we could gather and put it in a savings account. And we've run some numbers and figured out approximately how much assistance would be needed to run a full TB program in North Korea. What we've been able to save isn't nearly that much, but we're hoping that in time the general public will become more interested in this. But it's a difficult challenge, because the trend in both South Korea and the U.S. and Western Europe and just about everywhere else is that people are becoming more and more dependent on the government, and they look more and more to the government to solve all their big problems. And this program began as a private sector. It was funded as a private sector program. We have taken government money in the past, but only a limited amount. And I firmly believe that the answer to TB work is private sector funding. But that's a hard sell today in a world where the first question out of everybody's mouth is, if it's such a big problem, why isn't the government solving it?
Well, I guess the first hurdle for now as well is for North Korea to reopen their borders and to accept the help that is being offered by you and other humanitarian groups. And we hope that you and the foundation are able to get back to work soon and help the North Korean people in this situation, and for you to carry on also your family's legacy as well.
Well, thank you. And I think, though, if there's a lesson to be learned, is that we should stop the trend in humanitarian assistance toward making it political, toward using humanitarian assistance for political purposes, and get back to purely humanitarian assistance, which is private sector to private sector, without any strings attached, without any political agendas, and without any attempts to, in a sense, influence the recipient society. That's invariably a blind alley when you're dealing with North Korea, and it would be best if we avoided it in the future.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there. We've been speaking to Dr. Stephen Linton, the founder and chairman of the Eugene Bell Foundation. Thank you once again for stopping by today.
Thank you for your invitation.